we have X amount of money, or everything is absolutely perfect at work for the right time, the perfect time. Well, what's life about? How many times have you had perfect conditions for something? Not all that long, not all that many. So Solomon says if you're waiting for the perfect condition or for the perfect situation, when conditions are perfect, most likely, more than likely, it'll never come and you'll spend your time waiting. So don't overanalyze things. Don't wait for those perfect conditions. Don't overanalyze. Just get busy and do your work. Do the things that you know you need to do. Verse 5, as you don't know the path of the wind or how the body is formed in a mother's womb, so you cannot understand. You do not know the work of God, the maker of all things. Just as you don't know when life begins, you don't know how God works. Don't fool yourself into thinking, oh, yeah, I know what God, I know the mind of God, and I know exactly how He's thinking and how He wants things to be. Maybe you figured out a few things, and God has allowed that, but you're never gonna get on an equal level of God in terms of thinking exactly the way He thinks. Verse 6 gets us back to Solomon's earlier verses, verses 1 and 2, where he talks about how you spend your time and invest your resources. Solomon says, sow your seed in the morning, and at evening, let your hands not be idle. In other words, keep on keeping on. Don't stop working. Keep at it, because you don't know what's going to succeed, whether this thing or that thing, or whether both will do equally well. Hey, if double bonus if that happens. But until you see the results, you don't know what the results will be. So don't do just one task and then drop back and say, my work is done. Solomon says, it's really not. You need to keep working. You need to keep looking. You need to keep doing all those things that are set in front of you. There's a reason for doing that. And so that's Solomon's advice on work and life and planning ahead. 6 little verses. Then he goes into a second section, which is basically life in general. More than just work, but anything and everything that you do that in your life, everything that you encounter. Light is sweet, and it pleases the eyes to see the sun. However many years anyone may live, let them enjoy them all. But let them remember the days of darkness, for there will be many. Everything to come is meaningless. Everything is, there's that Hebel word, meaning it's meaningless, it's emptiness. Here, probably more precisely, it means nothing is permanent. Hey, if things are going your way, if the wind's at your back, life is good, everything you touch just turns successfully. You got wonderful family members, you got wonderful kids, you got wonderful friends, and everybody is fine and healthy. That's great. Enjoy it. Thank God for it. But what Solomon says is, don't assume that it's always going to be this way. Things change. Nothing is permanent this side of heaven. And remember the days of darkness. Hey, just as you've had good days, you're going to have bad days if you haven't had them already. There will be times when you have, that earlier phrase we talked about just about 10 minutes ago, when it rains, it pours. You get one misfortune, you get one unhappy or unlucky situation, and they just seem to start cascading on you. And you feel drenched because there's just so many of them. Yeah, there are days like that. And then large, basically looking down the road, looking at the whole thing of life. There is old age, where things just from a physical point of view aren't what they used to be. So that's why he says verse 9. And it's very interesting. There's some scholars who look at verses 9 and 10 and say, you know what, thematically, these two verses introduce chapter 12. In fact, they would be more suitable as part of chapter 12. Maybe they placed the chapter marking where they did because they felt, hey, chapter 11's already short enough. It's, if we take these verses out and move them to chapter 12, it's, that chapter's too short. People can hold their breath while reading it. So, okay, chapter 9, think of it as a prologue to the final chapter. But here's what Solomon says beginning in verse 9. You who are young, be happy while you are young. Let your heart give you joy in the days of your youth. Follow the ways of your heart and whatever your eyes see. Enjoy life, but remember, know that for all these things God will bring you into judgment. Yeah, lots of good stuff to do out there, especially if you're young and healthy and strong. And, there's so many opportunities that beckon you. Life is good. Life looks even, the big picture looks even better. That's just wonderful. Hey, don't knock it. Enjoy it. But just remember, whatever you do, God will hold you accountable, because that's God basically, in a general sense, good things will be rewarded. The good things that you do will be rewarded. There are consequences for whatever you do. If you do good things, you have, more often than not, you'll have good consequences. If you do bad things, more often than not, or ultimately, there will be consequences. Maybe not immediately, whether you do good or bad things. Sometimes the consequences aren't that immediate. Sometimes you don't even see the results of what you've done until way down the road. But Solomon says, enjoy life, but behave yourself, and enjoy those things as a young man or a young woman while those opportunities are there and while you can, because the days will come when there are things that you will no longer enjoy or not be able to do simply because you get older. Verse 10, wrapping up chapter 11, he says, banish anxiety from your heart, remove vexation, and cast off the troubles of your body. Cast off the evil from your body for youth and vigor. In fact, there's some translations translated as youth and childhood. Youth and childhood are meaningless. They're hebel, meaning they're not permanent. Hey, amen. We were all kids once, right? And maybe on one level we still have that inner child in us where we go out and do childlike things just because it's fun. But hey, physically, we're all mature. Physically, we're all adults. That childhood, that youth, that young adult phase is in the past. It's impermanent. It's transitory. It's hebel in that particular sense. I like how the Message translates that last line. He says, youth lasts about as long as smoke. Yeah, I guess you're right from a big picture point of view. It took us however many years it took us to grow up. And I'm sure you remember one of the thoughts when you were a little kid, I can't wait till I grow up. Man, when I'm grown up, when I become an adult, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Man. I'm the one who's going to tell my parents, this is what you're going to do and what you can't do. Ha, ha, ha. That kind of thing. And when we were kids, it couldn't come soon enough. Now it's here. And you kind of look back and say, gee, sure would be fun to go back and be a kid again for some things. So life goes on. We go through the various phases of life, such as it is. That's chapter 11. Well, next week we're going to land this plane. We will come to chapter 12. And, up to this point, a lot of what Solomon's been talking about, and, a lot of this is, I kind of like what some scholars say, this is an indication that Solomon wrote this as an older man because this advice, these proverbs that he keeps handing down throughout the book, this is a perspective of an older but wiser man, someone who looks back and says, yeah, I did some really good things, but other things I really messed up. Talk about those 700 wives and 300 concubines. Man, just filling out the forms on the health insurance was just terrible. Oh, gee. If I had to do it over again, guys, here's what I would do. And you would be well advised to do the same thing. So, up until this point, Solomon has talked very little about God. Next chapter, next week, chapter 12, we're going to talk about God. And also talking about Solomon's going to continue the conversation he started about getting older and the silver-haired days of life, such as they are. So if you will, read that chapter when you have time this week. And Lord willing, that'll be our lesson for next Sunday. Thanks very much for your time and attention. I hope you enjoyed the lesson, got something out of it. And until then, we'll see you.